So this is our Fullness weekend, and we're wrapping it up today with our service here. It's a special service in that it's out of order. If you've been here before or been watching online for a while, we're doing it a little bit out of order. So we're saying a few songs. I'm going to speak, and we're going to have 3 songs at the end. And at the end, you're going to have an opportunity to get prayed for. I'm telling you that now so you have about 30 minutes to think about it so that you're not shocked at the end. But it's also so that you will actually take action and move, because that's part of this weekend is actually moving. It's doing something about it, because some of you came here empty, and we want you to leave full. You came empty because of something that's in your life or has happened in your life or something that you haven't addressed, and you want to leave full. You want to be whole. You see, the whole word fullness means this. Fullness means, it's a noun that means the state of being filled to capacity. And some of you are not just not filled to capacity, you are far less than filled to capacity. Maybe it's because of something that happened in your past, something that's happened in your recent past, something that's transpired in your life, but you would say that you are not full right now. And by saying not full, I'm not talking full of beer, full of food, full of baloney, full of whatever. You are empty. You are broken. There's something that's not right. And the whole point of today and the point of this whole mental health series is that you can be broken and still be beautiful. I wrote a book called Wounded to Wonderful, and in there, one of the topics and one of the concepts that I talk about is kintsugi. It was a new concept to me a handful of years ago, and it's profound, and it's helped reshape how I think and how I look at brokenness. See, kintsugi is the art of joining with gold. In America, when something breaks in your life or something is broken, we generally discard it. We throw it away. We toss it. It's no longer useful. But in Japan, with this concept of kintsugi, it means joining with gold. They take that which is broken and they restore it using gold in the glue, and they make it into something like this. This is a kintsugi vase. It's something that may have been dropped, but now it was put back together. It has been restored, and now in its restored condition, it's actually more beautiful than it was when it was original. This is profound for the Christian. You need to know this. If you get out of all of it today, it's that you can be broken, and when you let God come in and restore you, He makes you even more beautiful. You are connected to Christ, and you can be whole, even though there are pieces that have been cracked. And that you are worthy. That you're not just worthy of taking up space, but you are a worthy child of God. And knowing that is a difference maker for us. But the problem is, when we feel broken, we want to hide. When we're broken, we don't want people to know that we're broken. So we have become, I said this in week 1 of the series, that we are professional storefronters. We put on this facade that things are great. How's it going? Wonderful. But in reality, we are broken. In reality, inside, we are empty. We are hurting. We are depressed. We're dealing with anxiety, loneliness, whatever it is, anger. But we put on this front that everyone that we want to show the world, our Facebook side, our Instagram side, our Snapchat side, or whatever social media side, we want people to think we have it all together. But you know, and God knows, that there's something missing. So today, we're going to address that. And at the end, we have people who are going to pray for you. They're going to be all over the room. And you are going to have the opportunity to step up and to pray with them to deal with this. And at the end of my message, here's how we're going to deal with it. We're going to determine what hurts your mental health. And we're going to share your hurt with a trusted someone. You're probably not going to know the people you're praying with. But you're with a trusted someone. And then you're going to surrender that hurt to God. You're going to give it to God and ask God to fill that hurt with His healing presence. No shame, no fear, no guilt, no sorrow, no regrets. We're just going to give it over to God. And that is that first step in that healing process. The problem is that most of us don't ever acknowledge that we're broken or hurting. We're so good at living a lie that we even fool ourselves. But today's the day that we're saying, I'm not going to fool myself anymore. I'm going to step up. I'm going to deal with it. And I know this firsthand because I've struggled with depression for years. I've been so open about this since even before it was 2017. But I had struggled with it for so long. And I finally dealt with it. I finally said, okay, I admit it. And I shared with other people that I was depressed. And I'm telling you, that was the first step in my freedom. I'm all for people, pills, and prayers. I've said that. I got the people part, I shared it, got the prayer part, the spiritual side, and I got the pills. I went and saw a doctor, and that did help me. So I'm all for all of that. But for me, the first step was actually acknowledging that I had a problem, and the one thing I wanted to do was the one thing I shouldn't do, which was hide. And one thing you learn the older you get is wherever you are, that's where you are. You can't run from you. You are always with you. And unless if you deal with these things, unless if you deal with whatever's going on, you will always be stuck. So at the end of the message, there's going to be a time for you to get prayed for. It's going to be a prayer of healing, especially when it comes to mental health issues. That's what we are focusing on today. And I'm going to give you 3 biblical stories that kind of show this healing in different ways from different angles. So we'll talk about these 3 biblical examples, and then we're going to move on from there. That's what I like about the Bible is it's so real. Like it talks about the people that have really grenaded things, like they've really messed up. And yet how God still uses them in unique ways. Let's face it, if most of our biblical heroes applied for a job at a church, they would get rejected. You want a job? Moses? Nah, he's a murderer. He's cross him off. David? Nah, he's an adulterer. Sent a bunch of people out to die too. Cross him off. Paul? Yeah, he killed a bunch of Christians. Wipe him off too. We disqualify them all. You need to know that God has not disqualified you, so don't disqualify yourself. God can heal your hurts so that you can live a fulfilled life. God can heal your hurts so that you can live a fulfilled life. So we look at Abraham. Abraham is a pillar of the faith. If you've been around Christianity for any length of time, he's one of the first heroes of the Bible. Abram, we all look up to Abram. He's mentioned in Hebrews 11 in his chapter of faith. He's like a superhero when it comes to faith matters. But Abraham also had his faults. One of his biggest faults happened, and the Bible doesn't use the words mental health. So if you do a word search for mental health, you're not going to find it. But where you will find it is if you look at the stories of people and how their lives transpired, you will see that they had mental health issues. Abraham, this pillar of faith, was with Sarah, a beautiful woman. She's 75 years old. We know that people lived longer back then, but she was this beautiful 75-year-old woman. And Abraham, this man of God, this pillar of faith, when they're going into Egypt because there's a famine in the land. And see, there were famines back then just like there are today. They had a drought is what they had. And so they have to go into Egypt. Now, this is what Abram says to his wife. This is the woman that he married. This is the woman that he loves in Genesis chapter 12. This is what he says. And you just have to imagine how Sarah felt. Here's what he says. Now, there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down to Egypt to live there for a while because the famine was severe. As he was about to enter Egypt, so he's going to go into the country of Egypt now, he said to his wife Sarah, I know what a beautiful woman you are. She's like, oh, thank you. That's my version, by the way. Then he goes on, when the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is his wife. Then they will kill me, but let you live. So this is all speculation. They haven't even said this. He's just crossing the border. He thinks this is what they are going to do. Bible doesn't say they would have killed him. He says, I think they're going to kill me because of you. I think this. Then he comes up with a solution. Say you are my sister, so that I will be treated well for your sake, and my life will be spared because of you. So tell them you're my sister for my sake. You say you're my sister for my sake. How do you think Sarah responded? Say what? Like, I don't even pretend to know what happens in a woman's brain. I gave up on that almost 30 years ago now since I've been married. I thought I figured out when I was dating, but forget that. But I know this. She wouldn't be happy about that because that essentially made her a single, eligible woman. The love of her life, the one who is her lover, her protector, her husband, is selling her out. If you listen closely, you can almost hear her sigh and ask, why? Like, really? You want me, your wife, to tell them that I'm your sister? This can't go well for her. And it doesn't go well for her. In Genesis chapter 12, verse, moving down here, it says this in verse 14. When Abram came to Egypt, the Egyptians saw that Sarah was a very beautiful woman. And when Pharaoh's officials saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh, and she was taken into his palace. He treated Abram well for her sake, and Abram acquired sheep and cattle, male and female donkeys, male and female servants, and camels. In other words, he was getting rich while she was pretending to be the wife of Pharaoh. The only good news, and the Bible doesn't explicitly say this, but back then, if you were to be Pharaoh's wife, you would have to go into 2 years of beauty treatments. So in all reality, she probably didn't have sex with him, but she was being groomed for that role as Pharaoh's wife. But can you just imagine her looking out of the windows, like in her castle in Egypt, or home in Egypt, and seeing Abram out there with all of these new camels and sheep and goats that he's acquired because of her? What was going on in her mind? Like, men, don't say anything, but women, you know, like something's going on. Like, we have a problem. She must have been ticked. And the whole time, Abram, I don't think he was happy. I think he was alive, but he was still living a life. Now he's in Egypt. Now he's stuck there. Like, things weren't good for him either, but for her, she'd been sold out. Have you ever asked yourself why? Or something ever happened to you and you just sigh, like, God, why? When you just feel like why? In mental illness, all of our trauma doesn't come from childhood, by the way. Some of it comes from adulthood. Some of it's been recent in your life. Mental health challenges, they're not all from childhood. No one has perfect parents, but some of them are from very recent. But have you ever asked yourself or sighed like, again? Like, again? I lost another friend, again? I lost another job, again? Why is this happening to me? I've heard so many people say that, why is it happening to me? And the only answer I have, the only solace is this, is that we live in a fallen, broken world. And bad things happen to good people. And sometimes things that we think are good happen to bad people. Life isn't fair. The fair's in August. There's nothing fair about life. But we find ourselves asking this why question. And I remember when my friend Al asked me the why question. He's like, why did this happen? And then he unpacked why he was even asking the why question. Al was, at that time, he was starting to just get involved in Christianity. And for him, he didn't think that he was worthy of being loved at all. Like, to be loved for him was such a foreign concept. And I dug down and I said, why is that? And his face just looked, he got this look in his face, this blank stare, this anger came over him, and he began to unpack his childhood. He was the youngest child in the family. He wasn't wanted. He knew this because his parents told him, we didn't want you. When they left the house when he was young, they chained him to the pole out front like a dog. His father beat him relentlessly because he was angry at anything. He took it out on Al. Al said he would take his belt off and he would beat him and beat him and beat him until he stopped making any noises at all. And he felt so unworthy, and he said, why did this happen to me? And all I could say was, I don't know. We live in a fallen, broken world, but I know that God was there. He wasn't for it because he's given us free will. I know that when Al was being beat, it broke his heart. It hurt God for what he was going through. And I had to tell Al over and over, Al, you are worthy. Christ was there with you. God died for you. You are worthy. And over the years, he actually started to believe that. I don't know why bad things have happened to you. I don't know. I don't know why some of the stuff that you went through. I don't know. Sometimes it was of our own poor choices, but other times, I don't know. There is no answer to the why. Why did God allow that car accident to happen? Why did this thing take place? Why am I the one that feels the brunt of it? I just don't know. But I do know that even in those moments when we ask why, those are moments that we can surrender to God. And that God will somehow use it for his glory. This isn't to say that God created it, that God wants you to go through this. It's just to say that God can use it in some miraculous way. God can use what happened for his glory. And that should give you hope. What happened to Pharaoh was that as soon as Sarah moved into his house, his life grenaded. Like everyone started getting sick. Things were falling apart, and they immediately tried to find out the source, and they realized it was Sarah. The moment she moved in, everything went sideways for us. The Bible picks up the story. It says, but the Lord inflicted serious diseases on Pharaoh and his household because of Abram's wife Sarah. So Pharaoh summoned Abram and says, what have you done to me? He said, why didn't you tell me she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister? So that I took her to be my wife. Now then, here's your wife. He's like, take her. This is not good for us. Take her and go. Then Pharaoh, this is what Pharaoh did. So he took that bad situation where Abraham sold out his wife, and now he blesses them as they leave. He says to his men, and they sent him on his way with his wife and everything he had. So all of that wealth that he has accumulated, now him and Sarah left with. They came there penniless or broke, and now they leave with everything that they were blessed with. God used it for his glory. Eventually, God actually used them to form the nation of Israel. He took that sigh and that why, and he turned that moment into a wow moment. And eventually, Sarah had the son that God promised her, and the nation of Israel was born. In Genesis 21:1, now the Lord was gracious to Sarah, as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah what he had promised. So God turned that sigh and why into a wow. I want you to be thinking about what you're going to be prayed for here today, and how is God going to turn that moment into a wow moment in your life. When you finally release all of this stuff, this anger, this hurt, you give it over to God. I want to see you leave here full that God is doing something in your life. The second story, there was a young man named Joseph. He was beaten and sold into slavery by his own brothers. He was, again, the youngest child of the family. This is not to say that if you're the youngest child of the family, your life is always going to be tough. No, I'm just using a couple of examples where that's the case. So, Joseph, his older brothers are jealous of him. They beat him. They sell him into slavery. This is their own flesh and blood. They sell him into slavery. They think that he's dead. He ends up going in under Potiphar's wife. He's sold into slavery. He's a servant. He's handsome. And Potiphar's wife ends up trying to seduce him. He runs from her, but because it's his wife, she claims that he was the aggressor. They throw him in prison, totally unjust. He's not there for a day, a week, or a month. He's there for 2 years, rotting in prison. But God was with him there. He can interpret dreams. The Pharaoh has a dream he can interpret. And all of a sudden they remember that this guy Joseph can interpret dreams. So they summon him up. He interprets Pharaoh's dreams, and Pharaoh puts him second in charge. So he goes from this wealthy family now down to being a prisoner, now to being second in charge of all of the land. And what happens? His family comes in for food. They need food. Now he looks like an Egyptian, walks like an Egyptian, and talks like an Egyptian. Some of you listen to 80s music. I don't know that. And his family comes. They don't recognize him. He reveals himself to them. They think that he's going to kill him. But he doesn't. He recognized that God was with him in all of these moments. And he says this in Genesis 50, verse 20, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." And then we have in the New Testament, Jesus' very own friend Lazarus dies. His whole family, Lazarus, they were good friends. They were there. This was Jesus' inner circle. And now Lazarus is sick. They summon for Jesus because they know that if Jesus comes, Lazarus will be alive. And instead, Jesus doesn't come immediately. He doesn't show up when they expect him to. Have you ever expected God to show up and he doesn't? Lazarus dies. Jesus shows up later. And this is what Martha says to him. It's recorded in John chapter 11, verse 21. Martha said to Jesus, "If you had been here, my brother would not have died." Have you ever said that to God? If you were here, God, this wouldn't have happened. If you were here, God, I wouldn't have lost my house, lost my husband, lost my wife. If you weren't here, I wouldn't have lost my child, lost my job. God, if you were only here, I wouldn't feel how I feel now because of this situation or circumstance. God, if you were just here. You know, sometimes God doesn't always remove those problems and dilemmas from us, but he walks with us through them. And he can still use it for his glory. As the events with Lazarus unfold, Jesus walks over. Bible says that Jesus wept. He was truly sad and sorrowful. He was sad for all of his friends. He was sad that Lazarus had died, but it also allowed him to reveal the power of God because he asked his disciples, like Pastor Zach preached on last week, to move the stone. He summoned forth Lazarus, and Lazarus came out, proving the power of God. So that situation that was sad and full of brokenness, God turned it around and made it for good. This is kintsugi in the Christian world. He took that which was dead and brought it back to life. He took that which was broken and restored it. And that testimony afterwards was far more powerful than the life that he ever lived before he was raised from the dead. God never wastes a hurt. He never lets pain go by unnoticed. And the examples of Abraham, Sarah, Joseph, and Lazarus, they're all examples of how God can use a cracked plate to serve a complete meal. And God can heal the brokenness in your life so that you will be full once again. In Romans 8:28, a verse that we cling to, says, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who've been called according to his purpose." So some of you, you've been stuck. You've been stuck in a hurt. I don't care if it's recent or if it's an old hurt, but you've been stuck. And you know it. And today's that day that we want to pray for you. We want to pray that God will release that hurt, that God will release that anxiety, that God will release that fear, that God will release that depression, that God will fill that void in your life. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. That today is the day that God will take that sigh and that why, and he will turn it into a wow moment so that you will leave here not empty, that you will leave here full, that you will leave here knowing that you are worthy, that you are a child of God, and that God wants to move in your life. And I really believe that that first step starts when you actually admit that there's something missing in your life. Because most of us live our life missing something but never admit it. And I wish that when it came to my depression, I would have admitted it a decade earlier when I was really hurting the same as I was for years. That would have changed my life and given me 10 years that I wouldn't have been battling these things. I know that God would have set me free. And for me, it was that whole thing of going to the doctor and admitting that I was broken. And pride was what kept me from doing that. I'm a pastor. Pastors aren't supposed to get depressed. I had people tell me, oh, you admit you're depressed, that means you don't pray enough. You're not spiritual. Well, they're wrong. I also don't go here to church anymore because apparently I was unspiritual, which is a lie. It's a stupid answer. We have real issues in this world. And it's okay to admit that we need God to come in and fix those. And I'm just like everyone else. It's okay to admit that. Don't let pride stop you. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to surrender our sigh and our why, and we're going to ask him for healing. So 3 simple action points for you to do. 3 simple actions. First is determine what hurts your mental health. What is that roadblock? What is that thing that you're carrying now that you know is that piece in your life that's gone? We're going to ask God to fill that missing piece in with his gold and make you complete. That's what we're going to ask. So what is it that hurts your mental health? And second, we want you to share your hurt with a trusted someone. When I say trusted someone, I mean any of the people on our prayer team. You might not know them, and that's totally fine. You share it with them. They are trusted. They will keep it confidential between you, them, and God. So you share it. You talk to them. What can they pray about? And if you don't even know what to pray for, you know that something's missing. It's okay to say, will you pray for me, whatever God lays on your heart, because I know that something's broken. I can't identify it now, but will you pray for me? And that person, we're trusting the Holy Spirit to give them wisdom to pray for you, that God will move in that area. I don't care what area it is, that God will move in that area in your life. And third, it's surrender your hurt to God. When you just give it over entirely to God and say, okay, I admit there's something wrong. I'm broken, I admit it. I'm going to take that storefront that I've been putting on for so long, and I'm just going to tear it down, and I'm going to be the real me from this day forward. Some of you, today is your day of freedom. You came here empty. You might not have even known how empty you are until you do a little self-examination, but today is the day that you are going to leave here full, and I believe that God is going to move in your life in a profound way. I believe that. I've sensed it. I know that God is going to move, and it all happens when we are honest and open up and say, okay, God, I surrender. I want to give it to you. So the worship team is going to come up, and as they play, we've got 3 songs at the end. I'm telling you this because we like to know where we're going. We have 3 songs, and during these 3 songs, this is your opportunity to get prayed for. So what will happen is the first song, I'm going to tell you, as soon as the music starts, our prayer team's going to stand against the wall, and as soon as it starts, some of you are going to go get prayed for. Then the second song, some of you are going to think you need to be prayed for, but you're not going to do it. So I'm going to come back up on stage after the second song and tell you that you need to admit that you need to be prayed for. Then some of you will actually take my advice and encouragement to you, and you will go get prayed for. So then by the end of the service, those that need to get prayer will get prayer. And if you didn't get prayer, even after the service, a couple of us will stick around and we will lift you up in prayer. But today is your day where you can find help and healing when it comes to your own mental health. You can give it over to God and watch what God does. The first step is for you to actually take action and move. For those that come from traditional church backgrounds, it is not a sin to move in church. It's okay. It's not a sin to say, excuse me, to move out of your row. It's okay. It's normal. This is our special service. It's our Fullness weekend, and it's for you. So if you don't do it, we can't help. You have to take responsibility for your own spiritual life. So as our team leads us, and as the song starts, as we all stand up, in fact, you can stand up right now, and as our team leads us, now is your chance to go, and you get prayed for by anyone on this side and anyone on this side. Our prayer team's going to move out there now, but they will pray for you. So take advantage of this right now.